Hi guys, Andrew Hutchinson here, and in today's video for my channel, The Book Hutch, I'm going to be reviewing 5 books from my childhood that were my all-time favorites and that make me super nostalgic. I'm deciding to do this video because in quarantine I've been thinking a lot about the books I've read throughout my entire life, especially since making this channel, which is both a librarian information style channel where I talk about what I do as a librarian, and I also rate, review, and recommend books because I do that all the time anyway. And I thought I would, I don't prefer the phrase to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, adopt 2 puppies at once. And so anyways, I was thinking back to my childhood and I thought about a couple of different books that really had a major impact on me. And so it's harder to give these ratings like I do on my Goodreads, which you can follow me on there if you want at Andrew Hutchinson. I'll have the link down below. But it's hard to do a specific rating just because I haven't read some of these super recently, and I don't know what I would necessarily rate them as an adult reading them. So what I decided to do is rate them based on the amount of impact they had on me as a person, which are all very high. There's nothing lower than a 4-star in this list, but that's kind of my rating system, as you'll see, and I'll explain as I go. But I would recommend any of these books, especially if you have young kids. These all came out in probably, well, some are older, but these were really popular, most of them around late 90s, early 2000s, and that's when I grew up, and that's when I was elementary school age, and that's when I found all of these books. And so if you have kids around that age, or one day you'll have kids around that age, I highly recommend these books for them. I think they'll really enjoy them. Obviously, based on their plot descriptions, you might have some discretion with when you allow them to read them. But no matter what, I think they're great choices. I personally just profoundly appreciated every single one of these books. And also, even if you're an adult, if you haven't read any of these, I think they're plenty entertaining and well-written books that you would like them now. So definitely give them a shot if any of them pique your interest. All right, so let's just go ahead and dive right into the review. And I'm actually going to start this with just my favorite book from my childhood, completely, bar none. So it's kind of an interesting one. It's called Naya Nuki, the Shoshone Girl Who Ran. And I might have some slight mispronunciations. I tried to do my research and prep for this, but I couldn't find certain specifics. So I think you would say her name is Naya Nuki. If I mispronounced that to anyone, I apologize. And looking it up with the Shoshone tribe, it seems like that's how they say it, but I could be wrong. And the book is by Kenneth Thomasma. So this book is a historical retelling of, at least some might consider, sort of a folklore story, and some might consider it true. At this point, I'm sure the Shoshone tribe themselves considers this as true. With the amount of detail that's in this, I would like to believe it's true. And there are some historical pinpoints in the record of it being fact, but I have not really looked into any interviews with Kenneth Thomasma or anything with how he filled in the gaps in this story. But it is at least believed that a girl named Naya Nuki existed within the Shoshone tribe, and that basically the story follows Naya Nuki, who is this young girl. I believe she's around 11 years old. And she is actually best friends with, and again, there's many pronunciations of this name, Sacagawea. I've also heard Sacagawea, but we've heard her name mostly as a retelling as well. But actually, from the same tribe, they're best friends, and they're young girls, and they actually get kidnapped. And their tribe lives in western Montana, that kind of area. And they are forced to walk all the way to North Dakota, where they're being sold to European settlers. And Naya Nuki comes up with this plan to escape, and one night she waits for a storm to hit, and she's packaged all this food, and she realizes she can't take Sacagawea with her, so she just has to run. And so she runs away by herself, and the rest of the book follows her journey back home. So she has to walk all the way through North Dakota and Montana to find her tribe again. Meanwhile, the weather's turning. It's the middle of winter. It talks about all the trials she had to face, what she saw along the way. And at the end, you find out whether or not she made it. Um, This book had such a profound impact on me for many reasons. I think one of the first reasons why is because this book was actually selected for me by my fifth grade teacher. So, my fifth grade teacher, who's going to crop up again in a few other stories, his name was Mr. Aker, and he was just this older man. He had a guitar, he sang to us all the time. He was an amazing teacher, changed my life forever. But he was really passionate about literature and children's literature. And so he would read every book in the library that kids could check out. And what he would do a lot of the time is based on our interests. He would pick books for us, which I think is such an amazing thing for an adult to do for a kid. And growing up, my mom actually had a huge passion for Native American cultures. She would go to a lot of rain dances. She took me to so many different types of ruins and just really immersed me into so much of that and made me a lifelong appreciator of understanding Native American culture in the United States. So much so that combination of her and this book led me in college to actually taking a Native American literature course, which I absolutely loved. So I got to read more Native American writers like Leslie Marmon Silko, Sherman Alexie, those types of people. And so I think I told my fifth grade teacher about that. And so we were in the library and he handed this book to me. And I kind of looked at him and he said, "Trust me, I think you'll really like it." And so I started to read it. And as someone who was just around Naya Nuki's age, it was so inspiring to read about this girl who risked her entire life to get back to her family and that she could have potentially existed. And I loved reading about just what she witnessed in nature, all the struggles she went through. It's just so beautifully written. And I just remember I must have read this book over a dozen times throughout my childhood, but I did so many book reports and projects on it. I talked about it all the time. And so for me, it's forever a 5-star book just because whenever I think back to my childhood and I think of my favorite book, I think of this one. It's just such an amazing story. And the fact that it could potentially be real is just unreal. And so it's a book that I don't think is super well known or super popular, but I'm forever grateful for my fifth grade teacher for recommending it to me. And I still own a copy, and I think I'm definitely going to reread it soon. It just, every time I do, it always takes me back to the first time. And I just remember sitting on a school bus and I couldn't put it down. And I had to know what happened to this girl and just forever changed my life. And so definitely a 5-star book for me. All right, the next book is called Walk Two Moons by Sharon Creech. This actually was another book related to my fifth grade teacher. So what my fifth grade teacher did a lot is I remember every day we would go through our different subjects and we would go out to lunch and then recess. And we'd come back and we would all be kind of wired. And he would turn the lights down and he'd have us all sit in our desks. And I think some kids could get on the floor. And he would get up on his desk in front of the room and he'd read to us for at least 30 minutes a day. And he'd always pick books that were super engaging. And I remember this book was one of them. And every day, our entire class would just be on the edge of our seat waiting to hear what happened next in this book. From what I remember, this book is about a young girl named Salamanca. And I believe she was born and raised in Kentucky. And then her mom leaves her family. And I believe she ends up moving to Ohio. And she meets this kind of interesting cast and crew of characters. And then she goes on a trip with her grandparents to find out more about her mom. And while she's in this car ride with her grandparents, they ask her to tell the story of her childhood and what she's just been through and all of that. And it's an intense book. It goes through some very deep subject matter about loss, both on a parental level, but as a child level. And so I would say there's fair amount of death in the book, so it's a bit more heavy. I remember I would tell my mom when I got home every day about what the next chapter of Walk Two Moons, and my mom was actually concerned. She's like, why is he reading this to you in class? And I just said, but Mom, we love it, you know? And that's what I really appreciate about my 5th grade teacher is he didn't sugarcoat. He was like, life is going to have death in it. And though you guys are about 10 or 11 years old, it's, you know, it's an uncomfortable subject, but this is a book that talks about it so poignantly. And I was very grateful he did that because he was an adult who spoke to us and gave us lessons that we needed to learn. I also gave this book 5 stars because throughout the rest of my life, I still remember scenes from it, passages from it. I've reread it a couple times. I always tear up when reading it. It's just a really amazing story. And so, again, not a story for everyone. And if you're a parent and eventually your child reads this, you know, maybe read it first or read it with them because some of the content can be quite heavy. But just an incredible book. Again, forever changed my life. And again, I think it's because I had a teacher who was so involved with reading it and really making it pertinent to our lives, even at the 5th grade age. So another one of my all-time favorites. All right, the next book I'm going to talk about, one that many, many people have read and heard of, is The Giver by Louis Lowry. I was super excited. So I went for college for my undergrad when I got a bachelor's degree in history. I went to the University of Arizona, go Wildcats, bear down. And Tucson, where the University of Arizona is, Tucson in Arizona has this huge book festival every spring, which unfortunately this year got canceled due to the coronavirus. Definitely understandable though. But one of the years they were having it, they had R.L. Stine come do a talk and a reading, which was great. But one year they had Louis Lowry come. And so my friend and I fought our way into this tent and we, got actually pretty near the front. And we watched her read. And I think she read a passage from this. And it was right when the movie was about to come out. And so she was talking about that process. And it was just amazing seeing her because I've loved so many of her books. This book, I believe I read this in 4th grade. I could be wrong. 4th or 5th, but I believe it was 4th, and I think we actually read it as a class. I remember it having a profound impact on me, as with, I think, a lot of people in my generation, because it's this young boy named Jonas who is in this, I guess, a futuristic community. I'm not sure if this is classified under a dystopian novel or what it would be, but essentially a community where there's no color, there's no music, everything is sort of regimented, and you're kind of just told what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And Jonas is selected to be trained as the giver, this person that houses the memories of society and civilization. And so I still so remember vividly when he learns what color is and when he sees war for the first time and just all of these chapters. And I remember just being so heartbroken when I found out that this society didn't have music, because without music, I don't know what I do. And so I just remember it just really captured me, and it taught me a lot about society and what we should appreciate having. And I read Gathering Blue, which comes after this one. I think there's a third one. I don't remember if I read that one or not. I love that as well. I really enjoyed this universe. I gave it 4 stars. I actually reread it again right before the movie came out. And it's not something that like super impacts me, but just the fact that it taught me so many lessons early on, and that I love the author, and I just really appreciated it. And one of my actually biggest grievances with the movie is that when you reread it, it's not a love story. And I actually appreciated that as a kid. I wasn't interested in that. And the fact that the movie made it into this love story, I was like, But no matter what, I really enjoyed the book. I'm sure so many kids still read it. And yeah, I will forever really love that book. All right, the next book I want to talk about is Holes by Louis Sachar. Again, a book that so many kids in my generation read and probably still continue to read, about this boy named Stanley who gets sent to basically a work camp for young boys who've gotten in trouble, and all day, every day, he has to go out in the desert and dig holes, and none of them really know why they're doing that. And it interplays with the history of where they are and what happened before Stanley got there. There's all sorts of stuff. It takes so many, it's about family karma, discrimination, bigotry, so many things packed into this book. I've heard that it's a very different read for reading it as an adult and reading as a kid, which I would believe. I think as a child, it just has a different sort of impact. But again, I read it in 4th or 5th grade, and it just, I still, again, can just remember these vivid scenes of, you know, when this woman who's in charge of all of the kids, you know, puts snake venom in her nail polish. And I always just, that image just made my skin crawl. And just, you know, what happens to all of these people, and when you find out the different revelations of why they're digging the holes, and just all the characters involved. And again, talking about, I think it was the first book that I remember opened me up to understanding sort of cycles, like cyclical, you can call it karma, but this idea that if you don't deal with your stuff, you're going to probably give it to the next generation, and it's just going to keep going. So how do you make the buck stop with you, and how do you deal with what's going on in your life so you don't spill it onto other people? And so again, it taught me some amazing life lessons. I would give this 4 stars, just the amount of impact it had on me. And I feel like, again, it had such a big impact on my generation. I actually really liked the movie. I haven't watched it in a while, but still, I think a great story. And yeah, just deal with your stuff, man. Deal with your stuff now before you get older and you pass it on to your kids. And then the last book to talk about is called David and the Phoenix, which this one I think was published in the 50s, if I'm not mistaken, by Edward Ormondroyd, if I'm pronouncing that right. This book was the last on my list as books that really impacted me as a child. So my middle name is David, and the phoenix bird has always been my favorite mythological creature. I was born in Phoenix, Arizona. Rereading, you know, being a huge fan of the Harry Potter series, the phoenix was pretty much my favorite part of the mythos. I wish it had been included a little bit more, but I understand why it wasn't. But the phoenix being attached to Dumbledore and all of that. I love phoenixes and what they represent. And so this book is about this young boy named David, and he moves. And I read this not too long after I had moved from the city of Phoenix to northern Arizona. And there's a big hill in his backyard, and he goes and he climbs the hill, and he finds a nest, and he finds a phoenix bird, and the phoenix can talk to him, and basically they form this beautiful friendship. And he takes him and he starts meeting all these other mythological creatures, and they go on this quest, and it's just this really classic, great kid story. And I remember the book really made me cry and just really touched me. And it was one of the first books I remember, because it was right around that Harry Potter introduction. And so it was one of the first books that really introduced me to a lot of mythological and mythological creatures, concepts, and kind of started taking me in that young childhood fantasy and area of literature, making me really appreciate it, making me a lifelong lover of it. And so I'd give this book probably 4 stars. It might be 4.5, just because of the emotional impact, but it came along at the perfect time in my life, and I'll forever be thankful for reading it. I know I have a copy somewhere. I haven't read it in forever, so I want to sit down and reread it at some point, and I definitely should in the next year or two. But again, just an amazing book, definitely a classic for kids, and it had such a lovely impact on my life. It really did. And so, all right, so those are my 5 books. I hope I did an adequate job in representing them and what they meant to me, as well as explaining kind of the plots and storylines of all of them. Ooh, excuse me. Again, if you have young children, or one day you're going to have children, I definitely recommend these books to them. I think they're all incredibly filled with amazing, teachable lessons. as well as memorable characters. But obviously, as a parent, talk to them about it, maybe read it with them. That's why I think some of these books had such a big impact, is that an adult was involved in reading it to me or recommending it to me with that personal thing, again, like the first one. But even if you're an adult, I would say, hey, maybe have a string of books that you start reading that are, childhood books, or that maybe some of these refer your childhood to, and you remember them now and maybe you want to try them again. I think you're never too old to go back to a book, no matter what kind it is. So anyway, I hope you like this review. Feel free to like and subscribe. Comment down below if you've read any of these books, or if any of them interest you, or if any other books from your own childhood stick out to you and that you want to talk about them down below. I really appreciate that. As always, thank you for clicking on my channel and watching it. If this is your first video of me that you're seeing, normally I don't have a hat on, I just didn't like my hair today. But I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to check out the rest of my videos, both book reviews and library videos. And if you're a returning viewer, thank you so much for stopping by. As always, I really appreciate it. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have a great rest of your day. Bye.